For almost 11 years, I believed I had finally found the place where I belong. Not because anyone ever said the words out loud. Because I chose to prove my place through actions. When I married Nicole, Brianna was already a teenager. She had a father, at least on paper. Rick still appeared for birthdays when it suited him, posted smiling photos online, and never missed an opportunity to remind everyone that he was her real dad. I never competed with him. I never asked Brianna to call me dad. I thought respect could not be demanded. It had to be earned. So I earned it the only way I knew how. When the roof started leaking after a spring storm, I paid for a new one before the next rain arrived. When Nicole worried about missing another mortgage payment, I quietly transferred the money before she even asked. When Brianna needed braces, I covered every appointment. When she wanted to attend a better college, I signed the tuition checks. When her first car broke down on a freezing highway, I left work without hesitation, drove 2 hours to pick her up, and paid for the repairs the next morning. None of those moments made headlines. Nobody applauds the man who simply shows up. I wasn't trying to buy anyone's affection. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Years passed that way. Every birthday gift. Every Christmas. Every insurance payment. Every unexpected medical bill. Every phone upgrade. Every emergency. Every problem eventually found its way to me, and somehow I always found a solution. Nicole used to smile and squeeze my hand whenever another crisis passed. "I don't know what we'd do without you," she'd whisper. Those words were enough to keep me going. I believed I wasn't just supporting a family. I believed I was becoming part of one. When Brianna introduced Kyle, I welcomed him without hesitation. Young couples dream big, and I remembered what it felt like to believe the future could be built with hope alone. Kyle talked about beautiful venues, elegant decorations, destination honeymoons, and a wedding people would remember for years. I knew the numbers in my head before he even finished speaking. They couldn't afford it. Neither could Rick. So once again, I stepped forward. I paid the reservation fee for the reception hall. Then the photographer. Then the florist. Then the decorator. Then the limousine. Then the honeymoon package. Invoice after invoice landed on my desk, and every time I reached for my wallet before anyone else had the chance. Nicole kissed me that evening after I confirmed another payment. "You always save us," she said. I smiled. "I just want Brianna to have the wedding she deserves." She hugged me tightly. For a moment, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pride. Not because I had money. Because I believed I was helping my daughter begin the next chapter of her life. I know how strange that sounds. She had never called me dad. She still introduced Rick as her father whenever people asked. But deep inside, I convinced myself titles didn't matter. Love was supposed to be measured by sacrifice. The engagement dinner arrived a month later. The restaurant overlooked the river, every table glowing beneath warm amber lights. Laughter drifted through the room while waiters carried expensive bottles of wine I had quietly agreed to pay for. Everyone looked happy. Nicole sat beside Brianna. Rick occupied the seat of honor near the couple. I was placed near the end of the table. I noticed it. Then I ignored it. I refused to let something so small ruin the evening. Dinner moved smoothly. People toasted the future. Kyle thanked friends for coming. Brianna laughed more than I had seen her laugh in months. I watched her smile and thought every dollar had been worth it. Then everything changed. Kyle leaned toward one of his friends, believing his voice was low enough that only a few people would hear. He was wrong. With a crooked grin, he nodded toward me. "Look," he chuckled. "They even invited her mom's ATM." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. The laughter around us stopped just long enough for everyone to understand exactly what had been said. I looked at Kyle. Then I looked at Brianna. She wasn't horrified. She wasn't embarrassed. She smiled right back at him. That smile hurt far more than his words ever could. Nicole lowered her eyes. Rick reached for his wineglass as if nothing had happened. Nobody corrected Kyle. Nobody defended me. 11 years. Thousands of sacrifices. Hundreds of quiet acts of love. Reduced to 3 letters. ATM. In that moment I realized something painful. I had mistaken dependence for acceptance. I wasn't family. I was simply the easiest way to pay the bill. I could have confronted him there. For one hot second, I imagined standing up, overturning my chair, and making every person at that table look directly at the man they had reduced to a bank card. I imagined asking Kyle who paid the deposit on the room where he was laughing. I imagined asking Brianna who covered the dress alterations, the engagement photographs, and the champagne she was holding while she smiled at my humiliation. But anger would have given them an escape. They could have called me unstable, dramatic, oversensitive. So I did something worse. I remained calm. I lifted my coffee, took one final sip, and let the bitterness settle on my tongue. My hands did not shake. My voice did not rise. I placed the cup back on its saucer with enough care that the small porcelain click sounded louder than Kyle's joke. Then I stood. "Congratulations," I told Brianna. Her smile disappeared. Kyle leaned back in his chair, suddenly uncertain whether I had heard him. Nicole finally looked at me. There was fear in her eyes, but still no defense. No apology. Not even my name. I buttoned my jacket, nodded once to the table, and walked away. Behind me, conversation returned in broken pieces. Someone coughed. Someone whispered that Kyle had only been joking. Nicole called after me once, but quietly, as though she was more afraid of embarrassing the guests than losing her husband. I did not turn around. The night air struck my face when I stepped outside. Across the river, lights trembled on the black water, distorted by the current. I stood beneath the restaurant awning and understood that my entire marriage had begun to look the same way, bright from a distance, broken when examined closely. I drove home alone. Nicole returned after midnight. I heard her remove her shoes in the hallway and pause outside my office. For several seconds, her shadow remained beneath the door. Then she walked away. That silence made the decision for me. At 6 the next morning, I sat behind my desk with a cup of coffee and opened the folder containing the wedding contracts. I had organized everything carefully because everyone trusted me to make sure nothing went wrong. The irony almost made me laugh. The venue balance was due in 12 days. I withdrew my authorization and canceled the remaining installments. The photographer had been charging my card in stages. I called, explained that I would no longer be responsible, and released the date. The florist, decorator, limousine service, upgraded catering package, custom lighting, and honeymoon reservation followed. Each call lasted only a few minutes. With every cancellation, something inside me loosened. I was not destroying their wedding. I was returning it to its rightful owners. By 8:30, the dream they had built with my money belonged to them again. Nicole entered the office while I was signing the final cancellation form. Her face was pale, and she held her phone against her chest. "The venue just called Brianna," she said. "They said the payment was withdrawn." "I know." Her eyes moved toward the contracts spread across my desk. "What did you do?" I looked at her for a long moment. It was a strange question from the woman who had watched her daughter's fiancé insult me and had responded by studying the tablecloth. "I stopped being the ATM." Nicole flinched. "Todd, he made a stupid joke." "No," I said. "Kyle made the joke. Brianna enjoyed it. Rick ignored it. And you allowed it." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. I turned back to the paperwork. "I canceled everything that has not already been paid in full." She stepped closer. "You can't do that. The wedding is only 3 months away." "I already did." "Todd, please. Brianna will be devastated." The words settled between us. Not once did she say that I had been devastated. Not once did she ask what it felt like to spend 11 years carrying people who laughed when someone finally named the role they had assigned me. Her first concern was the wedding. Even then. My phone began to vibrate across the desk. Brianna's name appeared on the screen. Then Kyle's. Then Brianna's again. I turned it face down. Nicole stared at me as though cruelty had replaced the man she married. You're punishing her over one mistake. No, I told her. I'm allowing her to pay for her own choices. She began crying, but I felt no satisfaction. Only exhaustion. For years I had confused rescuing them with loving them. Every crisis had become mine because I was always willing to solve it. Every expense had become my responsibility because nobody feared I might say no. Now I had said it. No venue. No photographer. No decorations. No limousine. No honeymoon. No more quiet payments made by the man they would not defend. By 9 o'clock, the calls were coming faster. Vendors wanted replacement cards. Deposits had to be renewed. Contracts required new signatures. For the first time, every problem stopped at their door instead of mine. And I sat there listening to the phone ring, wondering how long it would take them to realize they had not insulted a machine. They had betrayed the only man keeping their dream alive. The consequences arrived before the sun went down. My phone had barely stopped vibrating when Nicole rushed into the living room, her face drained of color. She was holding her own phone so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. They're canceling everything, she whispered. I looked up from my book. I know. The venue says the reservation is gone. The photographer already accepted another booking. The decorator won't order the flowers without a new deposit. I nodded once. That's how contracts work. Nicole stared at me as though she expected the old Todd to appear at any second, the man who would sigh, pick up the phone, transfer another few $1,000s, and make everyone's problems disappear. That man no longer existed. An hour later the front door flew open hard enough to shake the walls. Brianna stormed inside with Kyle close behind her. She wasn't crying yet. She was furious. What is wrong with you? She shouted before I could even stand. Do you have any idea what you've done? I remained seated. Yes. Our wedding is falling apart. No, I answered quietly. Your financing is. Kyle folded his arms. You embarrassed us. I almost laughed. You should choose your next words carefully. His confidence faltered for just a second, but pride quickly pushed it back into place. This is because of one joke? I looked directly at him. No. It's because that joke revealed what you actually think of me. It wasn't serious. Brianna thought it was funny. Silence. I turned toward her. You smiled. She blinked. It was awkward. You smiled. I didn't know what to do. You could have said one sentence. She lowered her eyes. Don't talk about Todd like that. The room became painfully quiet. Kyle finally broke the silence. You're acting like a child. I stood for the first time since they arrived. No. My voice never rose. I acted like an adult. Adults decide where their money goes. He stepped forward. You promised to help. I did. You can't just take it back. I didn't take anything back. I simply stopped paying future bills. Nicole tried to interrupt. Todd, please. I gently raised my hand. No, Nicole. They've spoken. Let them finish. Brianna's anger slowly began giving way to panic. The vendors are asking for money today. I know. We don't have that kind of money. I know. Kyle can't cover it. I know. My mom can't. I know. Her breathing became uneven. Finally, she whispered the question she had been avoiding. What are we supposed to do? I held her gaze. Call Rick. The room froze. Kyle frowned. My dad? Your father. I corrected calmly. The only real father, if I remember correctly. Nicole closed her eyes. Todd. But Brianna had already pulled out her phone. She walked into the kitchen while all of us remained silent. I could hear every word. Dad. A pause. They canceled everything. Another pause. No. Todd stopped paying. Longer silence. Then her voice cracked. Can you help us? I heard nothing except Rick's muffled voice through the speaker. Brianna's shoulders slowly collapsed. What do you mean you can't? Another pause. But it's my wedding. Silence again. I thought. She never finished the sentence. When she returned to the living room, her eyes were red. Kyle immediately understood. He said no? She shook her head. He said, he doesn't have the money. Nobody spoke. For years, Rick had comfortably occupied the title of father while I quietly carried the responsibility. Now those two worlds had collided. And reality was winning. Kyle sank onto the sofa. How much are we actually talking about? I opened the folder beside me. I kept records. I slid the pages across the coffee table. Reception venue. Photographer. Flowers. Decorations. Limousine. Musicians. Honeymoon. Insurance. Transportation. Each payment was listed beside my name. Kyle's face lost its color as he added the numbers. This can't be right. It is. You paid all of this? Almost all of it. Nicole looked at the papers as though seeing them for the first time. 11 years. Hundreds of checks. Thousands of quiet sacrifices. Reduced to black ink on white paper. Brianna covered her mouth with both hands. I never realized. No, I said softly. You never had to. That was the tragedy. Not that they used my money. That they had become so accustomed to my sacrifices they no longer noticed them. To them, the payments simply appeared. Like electricity when someone flips a switch. Like water when someone opens a faucet. Like cash from an ATM. Only now the machine had gone offline. And for the first time, everyone in that room finally understood who had been keeping the lights on all those years. No one left the house that afternoon. The silence settled over us like heavy rain, pressing against every wall, every breath, every unfinished sentence. Brianna remained on the sofa with the payment records spread across the coffee table. Kyle kept staring at the totals as though the numbers would somehow shrink if he looked at them long enough. They never did. For years I had handled every invoice before anyone else even saw it. I had shielded them from the uncomfortable reality of what their lifestyle actually cost. They never asked because they never had to. Now every dollar had a face. Mine. Kyle finally cleared his throat. There has to be another way. I looked at him calmly. There always was. What does that mean? It means respect costs nothing. He lowered his eyes. Nicole sat beside Brianna and quietly reached for her daughter's hand. Either of them spoke. There was nothing left to defend. About an hour later, Brianna's phone rang again. Another vendor. She answered on speaker without realizing it. Miss Collins, the woman said politely. We've tried reaching the guarantor all morning. Without a replacement payment, we'll have to release your wedding date. Brianna swallowed. I understand. The cancellation becomes final at 5 o'clock. I know. The call ended. Nobody moved. 5 minutes later another phone rang. This time it was Kyle's. The honeymoon agency. Their reservation would expire before midnight unless the remaining balance was paid. He thanked the representative with a trembling voice and slowly placed the phone on the table. For the first time since I had met him, he looked less like an arrogant young man and more like someone discovering that adulthood was expensive. Nicole finally turned toward me. Please. Only one word. Not an argument. Not an excuse. Just a plea. I met her eyes. Did you ask Kyle to apologize? She hesitated. No. Did you ask Brianna why she smiled? Her silence answered for her. Did you ask yourself why nobody defended me? Tears filled her eyes. I was in shock. You were comfortable. The words hurt her. I knew they would. But they were true. Comfort allows people to stay silent when someone else carries the burden. Brianna slowly stood and walked toward me. She stopped only a few feet away. I owe you an apology. I remained quiet. I kept thinking about yesterday. Her voice trembled. When Cal made that joke. I laughed because everyone else expected me to laugh. She wiped her eyes. I wasn't laughing at the words. You were laughing at me. Her shoulders dropped. You're right. The admission hung between us. I should have stopped him. Yes. I should have thanked you years ago. Yes. I treated everything you did like it was normal. It became normal. She nodded slowly. That's the worst part. I could see genuine regret beginning to replace panic. Not because of the wedding. Because memory was catching up with her. She remembered every school payment. Every late-night drive. Every birthday. Every problem I had solved without asking for recognition. I never saw how much you carried. She whispered. You weren't looking. She didn't argue. Kyle stood up beside her. I'm sorry too. I looked at him for several long seconds. No. His face tightened. No? No. He frowned. I just apologized. You apologized because the wedding collapsed? His mouth opened. Then closed. If every reservation had remained active, I continued, would you be standing here today? He couldn't answer. Because we both knew the truth. He wouldn't. An apology born from consequences is easy. Respect shown before consequences, that is the difficult part. Nicole quietly began crying. I've failed both of you. I looked toward my wife. No. You failed all three of us. The room fell completely silent. For 11 years I had believed love meant endless sacrifice. Now I understood something different. Love without respect becomes obligation. Generosity without appreciation becomes expectation. And a man who is valued only for his wallet eventually disappears behind the money he provides. I had disappeared years earlier. They were only noticing because the payments had stopped. Brianna stepped closer. What can I do? It was the first honest question anyone had asked me in a very long time. I took a slow breath before answering. You do nothing today. She looked confused. Trust isn't rebuilt with one conversation. I folded the payment records and placed them back inside the folder. You're asking me to restore a wedding. I looked directly into her eyes. I'm waiting to see whether you're willing to rebuild a relationship. Those were two very different investments. And this time, I intended to choose far more carefully.